What's up, y'all? This is DJ Kenny Parker, DJ and producer for Boogie Down Productions / KRS-One, and today I'm back with another video. Now, today's story is part of the series that I call Epic Fails, when hip-hop goes wrong. Now, today, y'all, I'd like to talk about the Source Awards. I assume most of you guys watching this video are hip-hop fans and are aware of the Source magazine, which started in 1988 and rose to prominence as the premier hip-hop publication. During the mid-90s, the Source magazine was at its peak. As a matter of fact, the magazine was so popular that they started their own hip-hop award show, which I do believe is the first all-hip-hop award show. Now, for many of you guys out there, when you think about the early Source Awards, what comes to mind is the 1995 Source Awards, with a couple of very famous incidents. One is when Outkast won the award, I do believe, for Best New Rap Group, and Andre 3000 made his famous claim that the South had something to say. The second incident, which was the most infamous, is the one where Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, came on stage and made his speech talking about if you didn't want the executive producer all in the video, dancing, come to Death Row. And many people believed that that was the incident that kicked off the legendary East Coast-West Coast feud. Now, although the 1995 Source Award incident probably kicked off the East Coast-West Coast feud, I would argue that the rumblings of this feud had been going on for a few years before 1995, which leads me to the 1994 Source Awards, the very first Source Awards. The event was held on April 25th, 1994, at the Paramount Theater in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, in the heart of New York City. Many of the biggest artists in hip-hop at the time were in the building that night, and some of the legendary performers were Onyx, Run DMC, and Wu-Tang Clan. Now, of course, KRS-One and BDP was in the building. For those of you guys that don't know, KRS-One is my older brother, and I call him Chris. So, we were at the Source Awards in 1994. As a matter of fact, we were probably second row back from the front, right in front of the podium where everybody came up to do their speeches and present awards. We were right there. I was literally looking right up at the podium. Here's a picture I found of KRS-One, along with our manager, shout out to Wesley Powell, and the late, great, my good friend, Biz Markie. So we're sitting there at the Source Awards, watching different artists win different awards and watching the performances. And of course, with any live event, there's gonna be some hiccups and some technical difficulties. But overall, it was moving along. But because of the technical difficulties and there was some delays, the crowd was getting a little restless. If I recall, the legendary queen of hip-hop soul, Mary J. Blige, won an award for the best R&B artist. When they announced that Mary J. Blige won the award, everybody cheered, ah! Then somebody comes on the mic and goes, Mary J. Blige is not here, and accepting the award will be somebody else. And the whole crowd said, boo! They wanted to see Mary J. Blige. Fast forward a little later into the award show, and the reggae artist Boubantan won for Best Reggae Performer of 1994. And then they announced Boubantan would not be performing tonight. Now, New York City, for those of you that don't know, loves dance hall reggae. And we loved Buju. Now, Buju wasn't there, and once again, the crowd started booing. Boo, boo. People paid big money to come into the garden, and some of the artists weren't there. Okay, cool, keep that in mind. A little later on in the award show, artists from Death Row Records were up for some awards. And I do believe Snoop Doggy Dogg won for Best Lyricist of the Year. And I remember when they announced the winner is Snoop Doggy Dogg, the whole crowd went crazy. Snoop. Everybody wanted to see Snoop, even in New York City in 1994. Then somebody goes, Snoop Dogg is not here. If I recall, it says Snoop Dogg is not here. And once again, the crowd booed. Boo! Now, some other members of the Dog Pound came on stage to accept some awards. Now, I don't remember which award went first because Death Row won for The Chronic. Snoop, I think Dr. Dre won an award, and Snoop, I think, won two. But for one of the awards, I do believe it might have been the first one that they won. Members of the Dog Pound came up on the stage to accept the award. And if I recall, the late, great Nate Dogg was up there on stage. So now keep in mind, BDP, we're 2 rows back from right in the front. So I'm watching all of this at a perfect seat. So right after a few guys spoke, the artist Daz from the group, the Dog Pound, comes on the mic and he makes a quick speech, which basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said, Death Row is in the building, and anybody out there from the East Coast that don't like that Death Row won an award can eat it. He said this in Madison Square Garden, y'all. The whole crowd went crazy. Boo, boo, boo. Daz didn't look like he cared one bit. Now, me being a native New Yorker, born and raised, I'm watching this and I was furious. I could not believe that this guy from the West Coast came on the stage in front of New York and told the whole city they could eat it. And because of my proximity to the podium, it made it even worse for me somehow because I was right there. It's almost like he said it right to me. I gotta be honest, y'all. I was tight, as was a whole bunch of artists, right even in our section from New York. So now there's some buzzing and some rumbling in the garden in our section. About 5 minutes after this, they called KRS-One and BDP to come backstage because KRS-One was up for an award. So we all left from the right in the front and we went backstage. When we got backstage, there was more guys from New York running around and talking, and I overheard guys basically saying, like, what are we gonna do? Like, we can't let this go down in New York. They were basically like trying to figure it out. In defense of Daz, I don't know if Daz was aware that people in the crowd were booing, in my opinion, not because Snoop won the award. The Chronic and Dog Pound and Snoop was huge in New York. I don't believe that the crowd was booing because they won. As a matter of fact, when they first announced that they won, Snoop, everybody was cheering. I think they were booing because Snoop wasn't there. Now, I don't know if Daz misunderstood why the crowd was booing, or maybe he knew the crowd was booing because of that and didn't care. I don't know, but I'm just going to say in defense of Daz, I think it was a misunderstanding and he thought the crowd was booing Death Row. But whatever the case, Daz was incredibly bold to get up there and say what he said. So, we're backstage and KRS-One is announced and he wins an award, Source Awards, for Best Live Performer of the Year. KRS-One wins the award. He goes out to accept the award. I was right there with him, just a little off to the side. He got his award. He said a quick speech. And then we went backstage. And there were still people rumbling. And I was still furious. Now, Here is the whack part of the story, y'all, which I'm not proud of, but I'm going to tell the story anyway and keep it transparent on this channel. While we were backstage waiting because KRS-One was going to do a freestyle a few minutes later in front of the crowd, up walks one of my favorite artists, not only of that time, but of all time, the legendary Scarface of the Ghetto Boys. Scarface is coming right towards us, y'all. And he sees KRS, he's about 5 feet away, and he goes, "Yo, what's up?" And he sticks his hand out to shake Chris's hand. Now, I'm standing right next to KRS-One, and I'm still mad, and I'm looking at Scarface like, yo, if you ain't from New York, I'm not trying to hear nobody right now. So here comes Scarface, and he's walking up with his hand out to shake KRS-One's hand, and I turned to Chris and yelled, "Fuck that, Chris, don't shake his hand." I said that right to Chris, and Scarface is by this point maybe 3 feet away. I don't know if he heard what I said, but my body language and my face, I'm yelling right to Chris, "Don't shake his hand." Now, I'm going to say for the record, y'all, that was wrong. If a person, any man, sticks his hand out to shake your hand, you greet him with the same respect and you shake his hand. Not only that, these are two artists walking up to greet each other, and I'm sitting there in my feelings trying to tell KRS-One not to shake Scarface's hand. For me, y'all, that isn't. Once again, let me say I am not proud of that moment, and I hope that Scarface did not hear me say that. Thankfully, my brother Chris did not listen to his younger brother Kenny and disregarded what I said, and he shook Scarface's hand and gave him a pound, and it was all good. And looking back on it, as soon as Chris shook his hand, I realized that that was the right thing to do, and I was bugging. And I'm glad, once again, that Chris didn't listen to me, and he wasn't in his feelings and shook Scarface's hand. To make matters worse, y'all, this was the same night as another infamous incident. A Tribe Called Quest, who won the award for the best group of the year, came out to accept their award. Now keep in mind, once again, New York City loves A Tribe Called Quest. So when Tribe Called Quest comes on stage to accept the award, by this time, I was back in the crowd watching the show. I was no longer in the front row. I was a little ways back, and I do believe that KRS-One left already. So I was there by myself watching the rest of the show from a little ways back. So A Tribe Called Quest comes to accept their award, and out of nowhere, here comes Tupac. In the middle of them accepting their award and doing their speech, Tupac comes on stage performing, "I'm out on bail, I'm out on bail." And as you know, Tupac had just got out of jail for some crime he did a few months earlier. So it was a surprise. Everybody thought Tupac was in jail, and he comes on stage with a bunch of dudes. "I'm out on bail, I'm out on bail," in the middle of Tribe Called Quest accepting the award. And I'm looking at Tupac, and he's bouncing around on stage, and I'm looking at Tribe, and they looked very upset. And I'm like, oh my God, the West Coast is just disrespecting New York City. Now, once again, in Tupac's defense, we found out later that there was a mistake with the sound man. Tupac was scheduled to perform right after Tribe Called Quest did their acceptance speech. What was supposed to happen was A Tribe Called Quest did their acceptance speech, and then the sound man would play Tupac's music and he would run on stage. So while A Tribe Called Quest is doing their acceptance speech, Tupac is backstage, oblivious to what's going on, waiting to perform. So the minute he hears his music come on, he runs on stage and starts performing as he was supposed to. But what he didn't know was the sound man started playing the music too early. So it was just a mix-up. And I do believe that QTip and Tupac were actually cool dating back to the movie Poetic Justice. So this was another big misunderstanding that happened at the 1995 Source Awards. But us in the crowd watching it had no idea what was going on. So it just looked like Daz cursed everybody out, and then Tupac just stormed the stage, and it just looked crazy. Like I said at the top of this video, in my opinion, the East Coast West Coast feud was bubbling a few years before the 1995 Source Awards, and the 1994 Source Awards didn't help the situation at all. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to Daz and the Dog Pound. I've never met Daz, but as we know, he's a great artist and a great producer. And like I said, I do believe it was a misunderstanding at Madison Square Garden. Maybe one day I can meet Daz and we can sit down and chop it up. That's my story, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and a like. And if you don't have the book, pick up the book. My brother's name is Kenny. It's the backstory of BDP, the origin story of KRS-One and my family, and a lot of behind-the-scenes stories that I saw in real life, y'all. So pick up the book. My brother's name is Kenny. You can get it on any platforms that you buy books. And I'm out of here till next time, y'all.